All right, artists, today's lesson is going to be short and sweet, maybe a little frustrating though, just because it is so complex. So open up your last coloring book lesson, and we're going to save a copy of this. So we're going to go to File, Save As. We're going to save it in the cloud document, and I want you to call it with your first name, but I want you to call it paintmixer, and click Save. Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to delete the sky layer because we're going to add a sky from a photo, and then we're going to use the paint mixer to make it look more painterly. So go to Google and find a landscape photo that has a nice sky in it. It doesn't matter what it is. And we're going to right click and copy. We're going to go back to Photoshop. And we're going to go to Edit, Paste. Stop the video and do that now. Okay, chances are the photo is probably larger than you want it to be. It doesn't fit in there correctly. So we're going to go up to Edit, Free Transform, and you may or may not get a bounding box. I can barely see mine because this image is so big. So I have to go to View, Fit on Screen, and a lot of you may need to do that just so that you can see your full image. And then you're simply going to click and drag to make that the appropriate size. You can make it bigger if you want to make it bigger, that's fine. Totally up to you. All right, I like that one. And then hit the Enter key or the check mark at the top. So stop the video and paste a photo in there now. All right, let's rename this layer Sky. And then we're going to grab a new tool today. We're going to grab the paintbrush tool. I'm going to zoom in before I do that. We are going to go in the drawer where the brush tool is, and we are going to find the mixer brush tool. What the mixer brush tool does is it applies color. Oops, I zoomed in a little too much. It applies color to a layer, but then also smudges it with the colors that are there. So I'm going to show you because it's the easiest way to understand this tool, and then I'm going to let you experiment a little bit. So you do need to double check and make sure on the sky layer. So your foreground colors, again, it's going to mix in that color. So let's say I wanted to make some more clouds in there, and I want my clouds to be a very pale blue for whatever reason. Oops, I gotta grab the right brush. There we go. With this brush, there's some settings up here. So what the wet means is how wet this photo is. If it's really wet, it means if I take my brush, it's gonna smudge really, really easily, okay? If I go 100% wet, it should smudge a lot, okay? If I go to 0%, my brush is gonna act more like a marker. So you'll see that there, right? Load has to do with the amount of paint that's in that brush. So if I'm loading at 100%, it means it's going to put a lot of paint in there, versus if I keep the load really low, see, it's not going to, it faded out really, really fast. So again, I'll show you. So load, you have to act, it's just like a real paintbrush. If I load it, it's high, that means I have a lot of paint in that brush, versus if my load is really low, that paint runs out really fast. See how that works? So that's wet versus low. So I've got to turn, I like to set them, it just kind of depends, to be honest, but I bought 1550. And then mix means literally how much is it going to mix this foreground color with that background. So again, I would leave the mix at about 50% because it's going to mix them about the same. And then the last thing I have to show you is cleaning and loading the brush. So let's say I want to clean out my brush completely, because if you've used paint before, even if I have this blue color, eventually if I keep using it and keep using it and keep using it, my paint is going to get muddier and muddier and muddier. You have to clean the brush out. So if I clean it, it's going to give me a little bit more of a straight blue. Oops, I cleaned it, but I didn't load it. If you clean it, you have to reload it. That's something to remember. So if I cleaned it, I've taken all the color that it picked up from the sky, I have to reload it. Now I should get more of my blue color show through. It's kind of tricky to use, so stop the video, and I just want you to play around blending some of your colors, practice a little bit with how much it blends and models, but I just want you to try and kind of make this a little bit more painterly, okay? That's too much. All right, so let's pretend I made a sky, okay? I'm just going ahead because I want to show you as much as I can. All right, the next thing is brushes. So we're going to give this a try, and we're going to see if it's going to allow you to load some more brush presets. But I want to show you where they are, even if it doesn't, because if you were a Photoshop artist, you would want to be able to do this. Because as you've seen, there's only a certain number of brushes in here. So let's go ahead and grab our regular brush tool. Doesn't matter what layer we're on right now, I'm just going to show you how to load some new brushes in here. If we click on the drop down menu, so notice we have some libraries. We have general, dry brush, dry media, wet, special effects. But if you scroll down here, you'll see I've got 3 folders that you probably don't have. Well, I found some brushes and I've loaded them in there. The way you do that is you click on the settings and you go to get more brushes. When you do, it should take you to this screen here. It might take a little bit, but it's going to give you some different brush options. So this is, Adobe does this. They work with designers that create these different things. So I'm going to simply find a set I like, and I'm going to hit download. It does take a little bit of time. You'll see it's down here. Once it's done, it should just pop up. So if I go back to Photoshop, and this is not going to be in there, but you'll see that this is where they will get added. So that spatter one is going to show up in here when it finally does show up. And then obviously there's some really cool brushes in here that you can then use. Okay, so I want you to stop the video, see if it allows you to load those. Hopefully it does. All right, the last thing we're going to do here is I'm going to show you how to change some more of the brush presets in the advanced brushes panel and how to save those. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a blank layer here. We're going to turn everything off. So we're just going to call this the experiment layer because we're literally just going to experiment on this thing, okay? Go ahead and pick any color except black or blue. It doesn't matter. With your brush tool, we're going to go back to the basic brushes. I'm going to fold up that folder so I can see it. Let's see if my spatter loaded. Not yet. All right. You may have to, if it doesn't load up, oh, it's because it's still loading. All right. If it doesn't load up, sometimes if you double click on the downloads folder, it makes you go through an extra step. Typically it shouldn't, but sometimes those brushes do. All right, so back to the advanced brush panel. I want you to load a very basic brush from the general brushes folder. It can be soft or round. I don't really care. Hard is probably you're gonna be able to see your changes a little bit better, but it just needs to be a round brush. And now we're gonna open up the advanced brushes panel. So we clicked on the little button here, or you can go up to window brushes, either way. And we're gonna click on a few different options here. So we did play around with wet edges a little bit, but I'm gonna show you, we play with wet edges in scattering, but I'm gonna show you under shape dynamics. So if you click on these, that's how it applies them. But if you wanna alter them, you have to click on the name. And then you can change up your work. So we're gonna click on both of these. Oops, I gotta pull my scatter up. Oops. Let's go back to my shape dynamics. And you're gonna play around with your brush. Let's see if I can get this. I'm just playing around so I get a little bit of change to my brush. What I'm doing is I'm working in shape dynamics and scattering. So stop the video and we're trying to create an interesting effect to our brush. That's all. All right. And then we're just going to sample. We're going to click and drag. Notice you now have created a different kind of brush. You can even tilt them. I just want you to experiment with these a little bit. I'm just playing around. I'm looking to see what kind of other effects I can get. Right? I can add noise to it. I can add a texture to it if I want to. What color dynamic does is it actually will shift your color to your foreground background color. So it's going to give you, what it's doing there is it's mixing your color. That's what color dynamics do. So you can see how it changes that up. So once you've done this, and you can play around with this as much as you want, you can grab a different brush completely. But if you click back on the brushes, we can add this brush now. So go ahead, and once you've got some presets, you've got a funky brush kind of made, we're going to come back here, and just so you can see this again, I'm clicking on brushes. At the bottom of brushes, there should be a little plus sign. If you click on that, it's going to allow you to create a new brush, and you can name it. So I'm going to call this my new brush. Call it whatever you want, and click OK. Now this new brush will show up in that brushes panel so that I can go back to it whenever I want and keep using that brush. Okay, so what I would like you to do, now that you've played around with that a little bit, and some of you might have gotten some crazy brushes in there, is we're going to delete that experiment layer. And on your ground layer, I want you to create a new brush, and I want you to add some additional texture. Okay? And that's it. That's our final lesson. Like I said, short and sweet, a little frustrating because it's kind of open-ended, but I wanted to show you some of those extra options for those of you who kind of want to take things to the next level. Good job.